Hi, this is Clarke Iakovakis. I am one of the instructors, along with Phillip Doehle, of the Bibliometrics For Librarians course hosted by LITA and the American Library Association. The purpose of this video is to get you started with one of the tools that we'll be using for the exercises for this class called Azure Notebooks. So I'm going to walk you through getting an Azure Notebooks account, cloning the existing notebook that we have for this class, and then walking through the notebook itself, which is going to review what an Azure notebook is and some basics of using R. So you want to start at the course website, which is given at the top of the page here, and also will be given to you during the class. And from this homepage, we're going to scroll down to this section here, exercises and videos, and we're going to follow these steps. The first step is to go to notebooks.azure.com. In order to use this, you need to have a Microsoft account. So that could be through, you can go to outlook.com and create that account, or you can use your existing Microsoft account if you have one. So from there, you're going to sign in. And I have this authentication here from my university that I have to approve. So give me just a moment. Okay. All right, so my screen is going to look different from yours because I have several projects. But once you're signed in, you want to navigate to the Azure notebook for the class, which is given right here. And you want to go up here to the corner and click clone. So what that's going to do is it's going to make an exact duplicate of this Azure notebooks, and it's going to put it in your Azure notebooks. So go ahead and click clone, and then go ahead and you can make it public if you want to, or you can just keep it private and click on clone to make that clone. I'm going to click on cancel because I already have it in my environment. So once you've done that, it will show up here in your list of projects. Here it is. It'll say Intro to Bibliometrics. So you want to click into that. And you can see that there are a set of files here. The one that we're going to be reviewing today is getting started with Jupyter Notebooks in R. Also in there is the notebook that we'll be using next session, which is really doing bibliometric analysis. So if you're interested and you want to get started and get a head start on that, feel free to go in there and start playing around. But for now, I'm going to click on this Getting Started with Jupyter Notebooks and R. And basically, Azure Notebooks is a cloud-hosted Jupyter Notebooks platform. Jupyter Notebooks is a way of weaving together text, like explanatory text, as well as executable code chunks. In other words, you can read information, and then following that, you can actually execute lines of code and have it execute those commands in your browser window. So in this case, it's very handy because you don't have to install R and RStudio. There's also Python Jupyter Notebooks. So it eliminates that overhead. Plus, it's a great way of weaving together both explanatory text as well as what the code is doing to make code more comprehensible and accessible. So I'd encourage you to read this brief introduction. And then let's get into working the Jupyter Notebooks. It has two different what are called keyboard input modes. Those are in this drop-down menu here. Really, the only two we're going to be using are code and markdown. If it's under code, that means that it is going to be a code cell where the only things that you can enter into it are executable code. So this is an example of a code cell. And if it is markdown, that's written language, essentially. It is going to say this markdown text. The difference between command mode and edit mode, if it is blue, it's in command mode, which means it's ready to execute. If it's green, that means it's in edit mode. So if I double click into this cell, now it's going to turn into edit mode, which means that I'm editing the markdown text. And I have to actually click on run in order to run that text. And basically all that did is render the text that was written in that code cell into actual readable text. And the same goes for these. If you double click on the border, double click within the body itself, you can enter into edit mode, so you can see that the cell turned green, and then you can either just click out of it to go back into command mode, or you can click on run if you've made any changes. So we've talked about the different command modes. We've talked about difference between a code cell and a markdown cell, and just look around at these keyboard shortcuts, because learning that can really help. So we have an exercise here. This is actually our code that is executable within the Jupyter Notebooks environment. So to practice our keyboard shortcuts for this first cell, press Shift and Enter. And what this is doing is executing this line of code. Print, you just ran the cell and selected the next cell. So I'm going to press Shift Enter. And you can see it executed that R command, and it printed the contents of that argument. And it also selected this next cell because I pressed Shift Enter. Pressing Control Enter will execute the code, and it will remain in that same cell. And then clicking on the third one and pressing Alt Enter, or if you're on a Mac, Option Enter, will execute the code, and it will insert a brand new cell. So if you've run into any problems, make sure that when you are executing the code, it's in the blue command mode. So I'm going to delete this cell because I don't need it. So to do that, I'm going to click on the border, and I'm going to press the D key twice. In other words, the D on the keyboard, press it twice. Something else to notice is within these cells, there's a hash key, and that is what is called a comment. In other words, R will ignore that line and assume that it's just kind of an explanation. So let's talk a little bit about R. It is more of a programming language than a statistics program, so it really got started in the 1990s, but it has a huge user base. And actually right now, as we speak, the Use R conference is going on right now, thousands of people. And the reason that it is still so used is because it's open source, and it's very robust and flexible, and it allows people to build on it. And the main purposes of it is to you can create data, you can import data, you can scrape it from the web, you can use R to clean data, reshape it, visualize it, run statistical analysis and modeling operations. And it really, in terms of both speed and power, can do a lot more than some other spreadsheet software. So moving on, when you double click into a cell, which I'm going to do here, the prompt is the blinking cursor, so that's prompting you to take action. So if you are double clicked in a cell, you don't have to be in command mode in order to execute it. So what I'm going to do here is press Control Enter, and that's going to evaluate the expression that I wrote there. So R is also a calculator, so it computes the answer to 2 + 2, and it prints the output here to our Jupyter Notebooks page. The first major operator that you'll come across in R is what's called an assignment operator. And this is an angle bracket, which is a less than symbol, and a hyphen. So when I execute this code cell, we say y gets 5. And what we're doing is we're creating a symbol called y and assigning it with the numeric value 5. So lowercase y is now a numeric vector that has one element, and that element is the number 5. Notice that it didn't actually do anything. So it assigned 5 to y in the background. But if we now execute this next cell, which I'm going to press Control Enter, or you can press the Run key. Now it evaluates y, and it prints the results to the console, which is 5. As we saw above, the same exact thing. We can use the function print y, and that will do the same thing. So if you want to pause the video and do this exercise, you can do that. And you can read these tips for assigning values on your own. So aside from assigning operators, you can also use R to call a function. A function is a built-in function that allows you to do something with your data. In R, you call a function by entering the function name, followed by the parentheses, and inside the parentheses, you include the variables and any arguments that you want to pass to the function. So here, sum is a function that's built into base R, and when I execute that, it's going to print 4. I also wrote in there a question mark sum so that we can take a look at the help page. That's another handy command in R, using the question mark to read the help page for a given function. So what we see in the help page is that sum takes as its argument an unlimited number, that's what the ellipses represent, an unlimited number of numeric or complex or logical vectors, in other words, bunch of numbers. And it also has this argument na.rm is false. So I'm going to close this help page. So here's the unlimited number of numeric elements, sum of 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'm going to press Control Enter to execute that. The answer is 25. If we evaluate a sum with a missing value, which in R is represented by the capital NA, it's going to return an NA. That's the meaning of that na.rm argument, right? So again, looking at the help page, it says NARM is logical, which means that it has to be a true or a false. And it asks, should missing values be removed? In this example, the sum of 3, 4, and a missing value is a missing value because there's no way for the program to know what that missing value represents. So if we want to force R to remove that missing value and then compute the response, we set rm to na.rm to true. Now when I execute this function, we get the sum of 3 and 4, which is 7. You don't need to know a lot of R to do the exercises in the notebooks. Really, what you're going to be doing is executing code that we have already written. To an extent, you'll be writing a little bit, but it will be very much kind of presented to you beforehand. So you aren't expected to know R, nor are you expected to write R code on your own. But the purpose of this is to kind of get your feet wet, or maybe your toes wet, so that you can understand the next notebook, which will be, that will be a much longer video where I'll be walking through getting data from R Crossref and Open Citations corpus and working with it within the R environment to do some bibliometrics analysis. If this has piqued your interest and you want to learn more, I've provided a set of resources here. Strongly recommend downloading R and RStudio. The Azure Notebooks is a great environment for practicing R, but once you start to get serious with using R, you will want to do that with R and RStudio especially. If you have any questions, please let me or Philip know, and we're happy to answer any of those. Other than that, thanks for watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.